Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Can you hear me? Good evening, dear Thai dear Sangha. Today is the 19th of May in the year 2021, and we're continuing to study the 40 Tenets of Plum Village teaching. Last week we talked about the 3 doors of liberation. Does anyone remember? What's the first? Your mind has gone completely empty. I called the 3 doors of liberation the heart of the Buddha's teaching. So there we can find everything we need to be free. In Sanskrit, it's written vimoksha mukha. Moksha is freedom, and mukha is the entranceway, like the gate. So in English we say door. Maybe doorway would be more appropriate. It's the way in. Anyone? Emptiness. It's the Daknim. And it's not just for the purpose of knowledge that we learn these 3 doors. They are for the purpose of training our mind as a concentration. So these are 3 kinds of deep concentration. And in Buddhism, when we talk about concentration, we talk about it as something that we apply and we maintain over time. So when we practice to become aware of our breathing, then we immediately learn to follow our breathing. So we learn to be aware of the breath as it comes in through our nose, goes down into our lungs, and then we continue to maintain that awareness as the breath then is expelled from our lungs up through our trachea and coming out through our mouth or nose. So already in the first few steps of mindful breathing, we have a training on concentration. So concentration in terms of Buddhist practice is not kind of wrinkling up your forehead and forcing yourself to focus on something. It's a kind of focus, but it's not something that makes us suffer. It's something that we train in and we learn to maintain over time. So in terms of an entryway to freedom, to liberation, emptiness is only useful as a concentration, not as a belief. You could say, oh, I became a Buddhist, so I believe in emptiness. And then that's it. And what good is that? What is helpful is that we learn to look deeper into the nature of reality, into all things, and see that this body is empty. These feelings are empty. these perceptions are empty. These mental formations are empty. This consciousness is empty. So that you free yourself from attachment to the body, to feelings and perceptions and so forth. You see that it's empty in what sense? It's empty of a separate self. So empty of the belief that there's some kind of essence outside of the non-it elements. So in the case of a flower, we know, like we learned last week, that the flower is made of only non-flower elements, like the sun and the earth and the rain, the seed, the soil, the temperature, the air. All those things are contributing to the manifestation of a flower. And if you take any one of them out, the flower cannot be there. And so the same is true for us. If you take away our mother or our father, we cannot be here. So through the concentration on emptiness, we don't see ourselves as just an individual. We are a continuation of our ancestors, our mother and our father. We are a continuation of the food that we eat. We are a continuation of what we've learned from our parents, from school, from friends, from teachers, from the collective society, from the news, media. And so with the practice in every moment of the concentration on emptiness, then we take much more care in how we consume things, because we know that we don't have the delusion that we are just some separate self that is pure. And so if we watch that movie or we listen to that conversation and that's full of hatred, watering seeds of jealousy and fear, we know that even we are a practitioner, we can easily get carried away by that energy of jealousy and anger and fear and craving. I think many of us, we all have a 5-year-old child within us that is looking out on the world with eyes of wonder. And that child is so pure, so free from resentment or hatred or prejudice. And if we're not careful, inside of ourselves, we believe that we're still that pure 5-year-old child that is not racist, that is not sexist, that is not bringing suffering into the world. And meanwhile, we continue to say things and do things and consume things which bring about suffering, that bring about the kind of views that divide, that bring in this person with that skin color is more important than that person with that skin color, or that person who practices that religion is better than, because that's my religion, than someone else. And we behave like that, but inside we think, no, but I'm not a sexist person, I'm not a racist person, I'm not a religious bigot. And yet other people experience our behavior like that. And I deeply feel that is true of most people. They don't believe themselves to be a bad person, and yet they do things which make people suffer. And we can all see in our own lives that behavior that has caused ourselves and others to suffer. And we feel misunderstood. It's because if we're not careful, we're grasping onto this idea of a separate self inside of us. And we separate that self from everything that we do in the world. And so the Buddhist practice is to reunify those two things, On the one hand, we don't grasp on to the idea that there is an essential me that is separate from everything else. And on the other hand, we see that with that insight, that concentration on emptiness, everything that we think, that we say, that we do, has the possibility to bring happiness, but it also has the possibility to bring harm and suffering. And so it is a very practical way of looking at things. We don't posit some mystical other thing that is out there, separate from the lived experience of life. And that is very helpful in reconciling and harmonizing our five skandhas. So we learned about the five skandhas. Body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, or emotions, and consciousness. These are ways, these are five things that we tend to grasp onto. We tend to think this body is me, I am this body. These feelings are me, I am these feelings. These perceptions are me, I am these perceptions. These emotions or these mental formations are me, I am these mental formations. This consciousness is me, I am this consciousness. And so then, when there are pleasant feelings, we are happy. When there are unpleasant feelings, we are sad. When the body is in good health, it looks beautiful, we are happy. When it's getting old, sick, or we are injured or harmed, we are not happy. Our perceptions. When people love us and we love ourselves, we're so happy. When people hate us and they say we are horrible and we do cruel and unkind things, we are sad. You see, so our happiness and well-being are dependent on these things if we continue to grasp onto them. So the training is to let go. And so we hurt our body, okay. It's just a hurt body, and we don't add or subtract anything. We just see it as it is. We are feeling painful feelings. It's okay. Pain is normal. We can see how painful feelings can be helpful. If we didn't have pain as a child and we put our hand next to the flame of the oven, we would not draw it away. We would not know how to protect our body. So pain is there to help us. But if we think, oh, I have painful feelings, life is horrible, and then we suffer. So that is the teaching of the second arrow. The Buddha used the story of a man who is shot in a battle with an arrow. And when that arrow is pulled out, if he is hit again in that same place, then the pain is 10 times as bad as the first arrow. And so that second arrow is our thinking, our grasping onto these five things, five skandhas. We are not, things don't go our way, so we have unpleasant feelings based in our perceptions about reality. So the practice of the concentration on emptiness is to let go and see that This body is empty. It is born due to causes and conditions. And when certain conditions are not sufficient, it no longer manifests in the same way. Last week we looked at the 8 negations from the teacher Nagarjuna, and Thai also refers to another line in that text. It's verse 18. In the 24th chapter of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika. So, the treatise on the middle way. Dependent origination. We declare or we see to be emptiness. It is conventional designation. Just this is the middle way. In the discourse given to Mahakāccayana is a famous line the Buddha taught about the danger of being caught in extreme views of being and views of non-being. So there are views that I want to be this, or I am this, and there are the views that say I am not this. And both of those are extreme views. So that is why Thai updated Shakespeare in Hamlet and said, to be or not to be, that is not the question. So we don't get caught in the idea of being on the one hand, and we don't get caught in the idea of non-being. We don't get caught in the idea, I am a happy person. We don't get caught in the idea that I am a depressed person. We don't get caught in the idea that I am a good person, or the idea that I am a bad person, or the idea that I'm an intelligent person. In a moment, we may say something intelligent, but then we get caught in this extreme. That means I'm an intelligent person. I can't ever do something dumb or unintelligent. And the same is true for non-being. We say, I am not a bad person. I am not a slow runner. I'm not a loser. I'm just using things that come to my mind. Things that we can tell ourselves day in and day out. I'm a good person. I'm a bad person. I always succeed. I'm always failing. These kind of things, those are just extremes. That kind of thinking, it turns out, is not helpful at all for understanding what is going on. And no matter how hard we believe that we are something or that we are not something, the reality will always be somewhere in between. And that is the insight of the middle way. Not getting caught in extremes views on being or non-being. Yeah, so the insight of impermanence and non-self helps us to touch that middle way. And those are all there in the concentration on emptiness. Becoming free from the idea of a separate self. And the insight of Nagarjuna is that dependent origination itself is emptiness. So free from those extremes of being and non-being, we see that things arise due to causes and conditions. So when the sun is present and the right quantity of rain and the seed in the soil and the air, then the flower can manifest. There are sufficient conditions. The seed doesn't think, oh, I am not a flower. I cannot possibly sprout. If it were caught in the extreme view, I am not a flower, I'm just a seed, then transformation would not be possible. It might happen, but it would suffer. Say, no, even as it is growing to become a beautiful flower, it still continues to believe, I'm not a flower. It's caught in the view of non-being. And the same is true for being. It says, I am a seed. I will never change. I am a seed forever and ever. Don't tell me that I will become a flower. And Thai used to love to take a seed of corn at the beginning of a 5 or 6 day retreat. And he invited the children to plant the seed of corn. And in those 5 or 6 days, the seed would sprout, and you start to see the leaves of the baby corn plant growing up. And so then he would, at the end of the retreat, he would hold up the plant of corn and say, my dear plant of corn, do you believe that only a few days ago you were just a seed of corn? And the plant would say, dear Thai, dear Sangha, how can you say such a thing? I am not a seed, I am a plant. It's caught in the plant of corn is caught in the idea of non-being. It cannot accept that it came from causes and conditions. So that is the difficulty of extreme views like being and non-being. So the middle way is to let go of all those questions of being and non-being and pierce directly the nature of reality, which is dependent origination. It means this is, so that is. This comes to be, so that comes to be.
this comes to be. That comes to be. That is the simplest way to express it. But as a concentration, it's something we need to observe through our awareness. So a good athlete will know to recognize how, if I train, I run every day, then I am more confident in my body to be able to run faster or farther. I am more able to do it. If I change my diet, if I eat in a healthy way, if I drink enough water, then I have enough conditions to be able to run. But if I don't drink water, I don't eat the right foods, and I don't train, then when I go out to run, I'll feel so tired, so weak. And I have a lot of difficulty. And though I believe myself that to be a good runner, and yet reality is giving me a different message. You see? So that is recognizing the nature of causes and conditions. When, as we learned many times already, when there is the sun and the ocean water and the right conditions in the air, the water can evaporate and move up as humidity and become a cloud. And that is happening in every moment. And that is, because the water is not caught in its belief that it is only ocean water. It's able to let go of its view. Of course, it doesn't have a view, but we are, for the moment, talking about the water having a view. And it lets go of that view, and it can evaporate up and become a cloud. So that is dependent origination, which is emptiness. And that is the way we, through looking at things deeply, through our thinking, through our speech, through our actions, seeing that these are all empty of the separate self. And so I take that's an invitation for us to take so much care with every moment we have in this life. It's so precious, every step. Even when I'm walking down to offer this class, I really practice to be aware of my steps, not to get too caught in the time. Oh, am I going to arrive late? It's okay to be late, but what's more important is this a legendary step? It means, am I bringing awareness to my step? Am I really aware? Right here. I don't have to worry about coming to class. Just enjoy this step. Enjoy the air, the flowers, walking down, seeing the beautiful valley of Deer Park. It's already enough. And it's already enough for happiness. So that is nourishing my happiness. So with mindfulness, happiness comes to be. So mindfulness is a source of happiness. So stopping, being aware of our body as we're seated, or if we're standing, whatever the position of our body, we just come back to the visceral sensation of the body. And because we're practicing the concentration on emptiness, we free ourselves from being attached to any part of the body. We just see it that this body is just a phenomenon. Actually, it's many phenomena manifesting. Millions and millions of cells, breathing, respiring. And we cannot find anything we can call me, myself, or mine. And yet, there is this awareness going on. That is a wondrous existence. Oftentimes the concentration on emptiness is called the wondrous existence. So Nagarjuna, I write down the name, the teacher from around the 3rd century AD in India. Very important Buddhist teacher who helped us to look deeply into some of the very kind of stuck elements of the teaching in the tradition as it had developed over hundreds of years since the life of the Buddha, and he helped free us from some of the sticky points. And Thai also gave teachings on this master in 2002, 2003. Hopefully soon we will have a book in English. There's a book in Vietnamese, but not yet in English, with Thai's teachings on Nagarjuna. Maybe we can listen to a sound of the bell. So the next part of the line, dependent origination we declare to be emptiness. Means it itself. Emptiness itself is conventional designation. So this line helps us to not make emptiness into some grand concept, some higher, like a god or something, that is the ultimate. Emptiness is just the nature of things as they are. It is in the conventional world, we see all the time the empty nature of things. That is what allows transformation to take place, allows the cloud to become the rain, to become snow, or to become rain or snow, to become the river or snowpack, and so forth, melting and going back into the ocean. That is just the way of things. And some areas of the Buddhist tradition have made emptiness out into be some high, like a higher state of being, or something to be attained. And Thai in Nagarjuna is inviting us to bring it back to the here and the now, to what we can actually do in our way of looking at things in the present moment, and not try to put it as some kind of higher attainment out there. It is just the nature of manifestation. Actually, the word is not easy to translate. The word for that here we put as conventional designation. is prajnaptir. Or prajnaptir. It means that which is made to be known. So it is what we can perceive. So it means directly in perception we can see emptiness. We don't have to think, oh, the conventional things of the world are just worldly names, form, smell, touch, all these things. But emptiness, that is the holy of holies, you see. So that is the tendency to make emptiness into something other than what is there in the world. And so Nagarjuna brings us back. Emptiness itself is in the very nature of worldly things. It is not somewhere else. So when we chant the Heart Sutra and we say this body itself is emptiness, emptiness itself is this body, it is not to say this body is something sacred as opposed to something profane, making a kind of dualism. Because that was a tendency within Buddhism to make emptiness into the sacred and to try to just brush away all the worldly things of the conventional world. And Thai had the beautiful poem, or the beautiful saying, no mud, no lotus, right? So we cannot have a lotus flower without the mud. It is thanks to all the muck, the dirt, the profane nature of our daily existence, which due to that nourishment, the flower can grow. And actually, there is no sacred and profane. But everything can be seen as sacred if we look deeply with the concentration of emptiness. That is the beauty of it. Even the coyote poop on the path when we walk in the mountain is sacred. And the garbage is sacred. Even there is something we can learn from hatred, anger, violence, fear. There's something there to learn from. We don't ignore it or treat it as something that just needs to be pushed away. If we just get rid of all the hatred and violence, then we'll be happy. There'll be unending happiness. So we don't get caught in that dualistic view. That is the concern of Nagarjuna. He wants us to see that in the conventional world, we find emptiness. In this body, there is emptiness. Emptiness itself is this body. It is not something separate, something other than this body. And of course, when we recite that in the Heart Sutra, it is just a marker for all of the 5 skandhas. So we don't say emptiness, feelings themselves are emptiness. Emptiness itself are these feelings. Perceptions are emptiness. Perceptions themselves are these feelings. But it means all the 5 skandhas, not only the body, feelings, perceptions, mental formation, and consciousness themselves are emptiness. So don't go looking somewhere else for emptiness. That is what the concentration on emptiness is inviting us to do. But see the non-it elements in everything that we observe. And then we allow the nature of dependent origination to flower forth. So the seed can become the plant of corn, and we know it is not the same as the plant of corn, but it is not totally different either. It is a continuation of the seed. The plant is a continuation of the seed of corn. So that insight is the middle way. That is our practice. That is the way we train our mind to become free from dualistic ways of looking, like being and non-being, same and different, coming and going, and so forth. Okay. And then we learned about the second door of liberation. I should have brought cookies to offer to anyone who can say, what is the second door of liberation? I don't have any cookies. Anyone? Signlessness. So looking at conventional designation, we don't get attached to the outward form. And we also don't get attached to some idea about an innate essence either. We know that there's the unconditioned nature, as we've learned in all things, in all points of time and space, that transcends space and time, but it has no quality, no form, nothing that we can call, that we can touch, feel. There's nothing there that can be designated. And so by practicing the concentration on signlessness, we keep the awareness of the unconditioned always present. That is mindfulness. By keeping awareness present, not grasping, we allow the unconditioned nature to manifest in every moment. And then amazing things happen. Wonderful things manifest. Just like the seed transforming itself into a plant of corn. It doesn't have ideas or concepts about becoming a seed of corn. And yet, when conditions are sufficient, this beautiful blossom of the leaves of the plant of corn manifests. And so the same is true for us in our practice as monastics. We are aware that we think, oh, I'm just a young monk or nun, and I only just begun to study Thais teaching, and then we actually discount that all the conditions for Thai, our teacher, to manifest, all the conditions for the Buddha to manifest are there in every cell of our body. The Buddha was a human being. Thai is also a human being. And if we train our mind to be compassionate, to be understanding, then we also can manifest those qualities. So it's just freeing ourselves from grasping our conventional way of looking at things and allowing transformation to take place, allowing healing to take place. And then we find ourselves joyful. We are not always being up and down, caught on our emotions, because our feelings are sometimes painful, sometimes pleasant. Our body is sometimes healthy, sometimes sick. The body may be sick, healthy, but we are still joyful. We might have painful feelings, pleasant feelings, but our joyfulness is steady. When we're in touch with the unconditioned nature, that is a fruit. That's how we know, because our emotions become more steady. And we're not so easily pulled away by desire for food that we like, or sexual desire, or images, and so forth, on the internet or whatever. We're not so easily pulled in by advertising to buy this or that. So it's so important, I feel, that is what Thich transmitted to all of us as his students, was this deep confidence that in each of us is the possibility to flower like Thich, to flower like the Buddha, to be such a beautiful flower. And he doesn't want to, not even one of his students would he accept that they leave the monastic life. It's very difficult. Many people, they felt, I cannot continue to be a monk or a nun. And they would go to Thich, and they give Thich the sangati, and Thich gives it back. I remember one sister telling me that. She went to Thich, I cannot be a nun anymore. And she gave Thich her formal monastic robe, and then Thich gave it back to her. Because he knows that in her is the capacity to be a Buddha. And he will not accept that you just say, no, I know I have the capacity to be the Buddha, but I think I'm going to just be a human being. Thich said, no, the Buddha is a human being. What do you think the Buddha is? If the Buddha is not a human being, how could we hear him teach? How could he have such a deep understanding of the nature of human beings? The Dhamma the Buddha taught is for human beings. You can teach the Dhamma all you like to a squirrel, but it will not understand what you're talking about. But if you are kind to the squirrel, if you are friendly, then the squirrel will be more at ease. And just like the squirrels here at Deer Park, and the coyotes and many of the animals, they are more calm, more peaceful, because they feel like, these human beings here, they are somehow like not so violent, not so unfriendly. But try as you like to try to teach them about the concentration on emptiness, you won't get very far. So the Buddha is a human being. He's teaching the Dhamma for human beings. It's to help us in particular. So how can you have the idea that I cannot get that understanding? The Buddha gave every kind of deep intention, aspiration in his life in order to help us to learn the Dhamma. But we are like Thich said, like a young man, a destitute man who has a jewel sewn into the fabric of our jacket, and we don't know. We are living in the street, we don't have food to eat, we're starving, we feel totally forgotten by society, but inside, sewn into the fabric of our jacket, there is a jewel. And that jewel is priceless. And if we only knew that we had that jewel, we could sell it and be the richest man. And yet we keep wandering around with that jewel sewn into the fabric of our jacket. I don't know, I might have a jewel like that in this jacket, because Sister Daknim, she sewed this jacket for me. And I don't know, I could maybe have some jewel in there. So this is our sacred inheritance as human beings. It is so fortunate to be born a human being. And we have that jewel, the Buddha nature, awakening in every cell of our body. And we just need to realize it and practice the Dhamma, and then it will manifest. The Dhamma gives us the conditions, sufficient conditions, in order for us to manifest as a Buddha. The Dhamma gives us sufficient conditions to manifest as a Buddha. That's an amazing statement. If you just realize that, then you become the wealthiest person on earth. And you actually can receive your sacred inheritance. That is Thay's poem, Inheritance. Very beautiful poem in the Please Call Me by My True Names. Stop wandering around like a destitute child. Come back and claim your heritage. You can enjoy your happiness and offer it to everyone. That is your sacred inheritance. Such a beautiful poem. And so silence, the concentration on signlessness helps us to touch that sacred inheritance, to no longer just get caught in just, I am this man born in this place to this mother and father, and I have to go get a job and work and have a house and a car and a family and kids, and then hopefully I can squeeze a little bit of happiness out of that, all those things that I get and the family, and then I will die a happy man. And that is it. That is the story that we create for ourselves. And yet in the course of trying to realize that story, to make it be, we suffer so much. Our children are not grateful. Maybe they get caught in addiction to drugs, to sex. Maybe they yell at us, complain. Yeah, maybe we cannot get along with our partner, and we wish maybe that they would die, just to leave us alone so we could be free. And yet still we cherish that story in us of a happy life. So that is a deep, deep suffering. We have to look at that story that we are telling ourselves and with the eyes of signlessness. And by doing it, we let go and we learn how to dwell happily in the present moment. We already have enough conditions to be happy in the present moment. And the beautiful thing about that is that if you master it, if you learn how to be happy in the present moment, wherever you are, whenever, then wherever you go, whenever, you can be happy in the future. So if you get good at dwelling happily in the present moment, because it's a kind of skill that we develop. It's a training. That's why with walking meditation, with each step we touch happiness. We don't think, if I just practice walking meditation for 20 years, then one day I will be happy. But with each step, you arrive at home. At home. So that's a training. If you can do that, then you get a moment of happiness, and then you have another moment of happiness, and then you have another moment of happiness. And then when difficult emotions come, when you hear someone say something about you, you hear news that full of actions full of violence and hatred, and you feel overwhelmed by anger or fear, you have a practice. You remember that practice of coming back to your step. I remember when I did walking meditation, in that moment, I could touch happiness in the present moment. What if I practice that right now? And you stand up and you breathe in and you take one step. And breathe out and take another step. And slowly, if you continue your concentration on mindful walking, you may notice that there are spaces in which your anger and your fear are no longer there. And as a practitioner, you learn how to grow those spaces. That's something I like to do. If I'm ever overwhelmed with anger in a moment, and I keep feeding that anger with my thinking about that person that did that horrible thing, then I look carefully for spaces in between the feeling of anger manifesting, when there's just a neutral feeling. And I see, rather than continuing to feed the anger with my thinking, what if I can just grow those neutral spaces? Because it's so unpleasant to be angry. It's a very painful feeling to be angry. And so, when there's that painful feeling, a neutral feeling seems very, very attractive. I might wish to be like blissfully happy and have very, very blissful, pleasant feelings, but just having a neutral feeling would be good enough when I'm very, very angry, because it's so painful. So I learned as a young practitioner to look for those spaces where, oh, gosh, a moment ago I just felt so much anger towards that person for that thing they did. But in this moment, in this 1 second, I'm not feeling angry. What if I see what created that? What conditions, in terms of dependent origination, causes and conditions, what allowed that space to be there? Well, I see, in that moment I wasn't continuing to get caught in my thinking about what happened, what she did to me, what she said about me. So what if I stop my thinking and put all my attention on my step and my breathing, and then that neutral feeling grows wider and wider. And if you do that with concentration, you might find in a few minutes your anger has disappeared. And that is not just by chance. That is because you are practicing, you're putting into practice the concentration on signlessness. You're not getting caught in your thinking about reality, but you come back to the lived experience of reality. You don't get caught in the qualities or the smell, the sound, anything, the outward form. But rather you leave an open space for new possibility to arise. That is a concentration on signlessness. And the third is, you remember? Aimlessness, yeah. So you don't put something out there. This is a very, very joyful door of liberation. You see in what way, we have this, from our ancestors, a tendency to want to track down our prey, like a hunter. And happiness can be a kind of prey that we try to hunt down our whole life. And we know that if we have the right weapons, if we have a good team of hunters, then we can track down happiness and shoot it to the ground with our bow or with our spear. So we use that ancestral tendency to hunt, whether as an individual or as a group, and to try to attain a diploma, to be a wealthy person, to be admired, famous, to have lots of sex, lots of good food, a beautiful house, or even just happiness itself. We just want to be happy. But we're unable to touch happiness in the present moment, to dwell happily in the present moment. So we just have an idea about happiness, and that idea grows in our head. But it's not certain that that idea has very much to do with the reality of being happy. In fact, it may be the biggest obstacle to our happiness. You think if you just had that car, or if everyone in your family would just be silent or be friendly to one another, then that would be bliss. But then that thing happens, and yet you're still not happy. You still feel depression. You feel unsatisfied. So if we are a practitioner, and usually if we became a monastic, we already had that insight. Whether it was in one of our relationships where we fell in love and we thought, this is true love, I can be with this person forever, and yet somehow we find ourselves unhappy in that relationship. And then at some point before, we thought, if I could only be with that person, that would be, my whole life would be bliss, blissfully happy. But then we are with that person, we have everything we wanted, and yet suddenly that person looks like a monster to us. And it seems like that person that we wanted so much in the past has become the source of all of our unhappiness. And that is a lived reality for many people. Because they're caught in the sign of that person. They think that they're in love with the image of their partner and not with the reality, the slobbering, smelly, farting, messy reality of a human body that complains when we don't do the things correctly that we are supposed to do, that judges and all these things. So, as practitioners, as monastics, we make that decision to come back to ourselves, to come to the monastery, to look deeply in our heart and understand the nature of this suffering, rather than getting caught in an idea about happiness. That is the practice of aimlessness. So aimlessness doesn't mean we don't have a path. It means we don't get caught in what is at the end of the path. But every step is joy. Every step is freedom. That is a concentration on aimlessness. And then, no matter where you go, you can be happy. Because your happiness is not dependent on where you are. So it's a kind of, the three doors of liberation are so freeing because they're not dependent on a place, they're not dependent on a time, they're not dependent on having some material object or some title or recognition. So the Buddha transmitted deeply this essential teaching to help us to become free from our suffering when we still find ourselves grasping after worldly attainments. We always have that concentration on aimlessness, and then we can be free. So it's a wonderful, very tasty concentration, the concentration on aimlessness. Can I let go of what I'm aiming to do and just touch joy in the present moment, touch freedom in every moment? Okay, so that's just a little review of the 3 doors of liberation from last week. Going a little bit more deeply into it. So that brings us to the 9th tenet. the Three Dharma Seals. The Three Dharma Seals are impermanence, no self, and nirvana. If we want, we can have 4 or 5 Dharma Seals. As long as they have nirvana as one of them. So it's not necessarily the Buddha which put numbered lists of things in the teaching, but over time the community, as a way of remembering aspects of the Dhamma which helped them to practice, began to make lists. And one of those lists that came up was a list that could be called the signs of the Dhamma, or the seal. The seal in the sense like the emperor's seal. He has a sign, maybe carved in wood or another material, and they put the hot wax on the envelope to be sealed, and then they press it into the hot wax so that when the person receives it, they know this is the sign of the emperor. And so how can we tell that a teaching is the Dhamma? We can tell by the seal, by the quality, the sign. And one of those signs is impermanence. Any teaching that is a true Dhamma always has the teaching of impermanence. So if we continue to hold on to an idea of permanence, then that is not the Dhamma. That is still some kind of grasping at an extreme view. So the view of permanence is a kind of extreme view, like the permanence of being or the permanence of non-being. Those are views of permanence, that something lasts forever, it can never change. It goes against everything that we experience in life. Everything changes. Even we know that the most stable particles in the universe, like a proton, eventually decays, although it lasts for billions and billions of years. And yet it still is of the nature of to be impermanent. How much more so our body, our feelings, our perceptions. And Most of us are not caught grasping at protons, but we do get caught grasping at our body, at our feelings, and the other skandhas. So the Buddha's teaching is very practical. It's not saying, don't get attached to protons. But it's saying, what are those things that we tend to get most attached to? Well, it is a certain configuration of protons, this body, or these feelings. And so for practical purposes, we learn to let go of them because we know they're impermanent. And any attempt to grasp at them will always fail. Because the thing that we set out to grasp at, by the time we try to grasp it, it has already changed. And as we continue to try to hold on to it, it is changing in real time, as well as our energy of grasping. It is also changing. And so everything, the grasping and the grasper and the thing we grasp are empty and impermanent. They are not there's not a separate self. So that is one sign that we can tell this is the Dhamma. If we see that it is a teaching that includes impermanence. And then the second Dhamma seal, no self. So the concentration on emptiness helps us to touch, to recognize the no-self nature of all things. So the three doors of liberation can help us to see the Dhamma in things. Seeing the signless nature, not getting caught in the qualities of things, we touch the impermanence of things. So the Dhamma seals are related to the three doors of liberation. And so I think we understand this teaching already very deeply from the concentration on emptiness. No self here means no separate self. Things are only made of non-it elements. And the third Dhamma seal, Nirvana. So this is essential. And this is the teaching of Plum Village. If there were no unconditioned, then what could all conditioned things go back to? If there were no unconditioned, as the Buddha said, there would be no freedom. There would be no, how could, without the unconditioned, how could we touch the uncreate? How could freedom be possible? And so the insight of the Buddha is that freedom is possible. That touching the unconditioned is possible. And that is a nature, that is a sign, that is a true Dhamma teaching. Without that, then it can just be like a materialistic way of looking at the world. We just see signs, we have perceptions, and that is it. There's nothing more. We don't see the nature of causes and conditions, always transforming, always changing, always free from a separate self. And then freeing ourselves from attachment to all those things, touching the unconditioned nature of nirvana. That is one of the Dhamma seals, and we cannot remove that. That is Thay's insight. There are other, in different traditions, we have other configurations of the three Dhamma seals. When we look in, for example, in the tradition of the Pali Canon, usually these three do not include nirvana, but have suffering because suffering is a noble truth. And there's a discourse, many discourses actually, where the Buddha said to his monks, he said, are things in the world permanent or impermanent? And they said, impermanent. And then he asked them, are impermanent things suffering or not suffering? And they said, they are suffering. And Thay's insight into that teaching is that it is not things themselves, because they are impermanent, that makes them suffering, but it is our grasping at those things and believing them to be permanent that makes us suffer. And so a misunderstanding of the teaching is to think that all things, because they are impermanent, they are suffering. But it is not because they are impermanent that we suffer, it's because we grasp at them and believe them to be permanent that we suffer. And so we need to have that understanding, that deeper way of looking into the nature of things. Otherwise we think that all material things are causing us to suffer. And we feel that this body itself is impermanent, and it is suffering. And we can get caught in a nihilistic view of the world. We can get caught in the view that I just want to destroy this body because it is impermanent and it is just suffering. I want to become free. And there were monks in the time of the Buddha who had that kind of wrong view. And they thought, by killing myself, I will become free from the suffering nature of this body. And that is a very wrong view. And so this teaching of the Dharma Seals as impermanence, no self, and nirvana is a very skillful way. We have to see the nature of nirvana in this very body. Yes, there is suffering, but not only suffering. There is the possibility of happiness and freedom. There is the unconditioned nature. And so Thai is very insistent. He says, if we want, we can have 4 or 5 Dharma Seals. If you want, you can add suffering in there, because suffering is a great teacher. Without the mud, there's no lotus. And we can learn from our suffering. Of course, that is a deep and important teaching of the Dhamma. But we cannot have the 3 Dharma Seals without nirvana. That is the insight of Plum Village teaching and a contribution to the Buddhist tradition. And in the link, in the description of this video for the class today, I put a link to the Channa Sutra from the Samyukta Agama, from early Buddhist texts, just as well as in the Pali Canon tradition. And so Thai, in his last 10 or 15 years of teaching, dedicated a lot of his energy to translating the early Buddhist texts from the Samyutta, from the Agamas in the Chinese. And this was one of the texts that Thai, in the Chinese, and this was one of the texts that Thai added to our chanting book. And the next time we update the chanting book, the Channa Sutta, I encourage you all to study it. And there Thai saw the presence in a very early text of these 3 Dharma Seals of impermanence, no self, and nirvana as peace. So I encourage you all to read that. I put a link to the translation online. Thank you so much for your practice, and an announcement for everyone joining us online. So next week here at Deer Park, we'll have a wake-up retreat for young people online, and so we'll be focusing on doing that retreat. And then after that, there'll be a break of a few weeks. So please look for the next class of the 40 tenets sometime in the second half of June. So we'll have a few weeks of break from class. Okay, we can finish with 3 sounds of the bell.